Okay, so you want to own a self-storage facility. Rows of orange doors, tenants paying every month whether they visit their unit or not, and almost no staff needed to keep it running. A real estate business that practically operates itself. Sounds simple. It is not simple. Here's the problem. Almost none of that is how this business actually works. And by the end of this, you'll understand why self-storage looks like the easiest real estate asset in America, right up until you actually try to build and fill one. Let's start with the entry fee, because ground-up self-storage development is far more capital-intensive than the empty lot with a fence image suggests. A mid-size facility with 500 to 700 units across 60,000 to 80,000 square feet typically costs $4 million to $7 million to develop, including land acquisition, site work, and climate-controlled building construction, depending on your market and whether you're building single-story drive-up units or a multi-story indoor facility. And that land acquisition piece matters more than people expect, because self-storage requires specific zoning that many municipalities restrict heavily, sometimes limiting new facilities within a certain radius of existing ones, meaning the land itself can cost $800,000 to $2 million just to secure a legally viable site. Add site engineering, environmental studies, and the security infrastructure modern facilities require, gated access, individual unit alarms, and camera systems throughout. And you're looking at another $300,000 to $600,000 before you've rented a single unit. Most developers finance 65 to 75% of total costs through construction loans, leaving an equity check of $1.4 million to $2.5 million in cash before generating a dollar of revenue. Here's the first trap almost nobody sees coming. Self-storage facilities take significantly longer to reach stabilized occupancy than almost any other real estate asset class, typically 24 to 36 months, to reach the 85 to 90% occupancy lenders and investors consider stable. During that entire lease-up period, you're paying full debt service on a mostly empty building, and unlike an apartment complex where a slow lease-up still generates meaningful partial revenue, storage facilities in weak markets can sit at 30 to 40% occupancy for over a year, while local demand slowly catches up to newly built supply. New developers routinely underestimate this timeline, assuming storage rents itself, when in reality, building genuine market awareness for a new facility takes far longer than most other property types. Now let's talk about what happens after you actually open, because the operating bleed at a self-storage facility, while lower per square foot than most commercial real estate, never fully disappears regardless of occupancy. Property taxes on an asset valued at $5 million typically run $60,000 to $120,000 a year depending on jurisdiction. Insurance, covering the facility and increasingly climate-related risk in many markets, costs $25,000 to $60,000 annually. Utilities, particularly for climate-controlled facilities requiring constant HVAC operation, run $40,000 to $90,000 a year. Security system maintenance and monitoring, essential for the access control and camera infrastructure tenants expect, cost $15,000 to $35,000 annually. Marketing, critical in a business where most tenants find you through search rather than driving past, runs $30,000 to $70,000 a year, a cost that surprises operators who assumed the orange doors would market themselves. Then there's debt service. On a $4 million construction loan, annual payments can reach $280,000 to $400,000. Here's the economic reality that will define your entire career in this business. Your fixed costs are genuinely lower per unit than almost any other real estate asset, but that advantage means nothing if you can't fill units fast enough to outpace competitors building the exact same facility down the road. Here's the part the passive income dream skips entirely, and it's the part that actually explains why this business exists in the first place. A self-storage facility does not primarily make money from the base rent tenants agreed to when they signed their lease. It makes money from systematic rent increases on tenants who almost never move out, and from a suite of fees that generate margins the storage space itself could never achieve. Understand this, and you understand why sophisticated operators think of self-storage less as a real estate business and more as a subscription business with a physical box attached. On a typical unit renting at $120 a month, industry data shows the average tenant stays 14 to 18 months and rarely shops around once their belongings are in a unit, creating pricing power that operators exploit through annual rent increases of 8 to 12%. increases that would trigger immediate cancellation in almost any other subscription business, but rarely do here because moving physical belongings is genuinely burdensome. Add mandatory tenant insurance, generating 60 to 80% margins and often required at lease signing, late fees on the meaningful percentage of tenants who pay late every single month, and administrative fees charged at move-in, and the effective revenue per unit runs significantly higher than the advertised rental rate suggests. The orange door is the product on the surface. The rent increase algorithm and the fee structure underneath are the real business. Now let's follow one tenant relationship and see where the actual profit accumulates. A tenant signs a lease at $120 a month, paying a $40 move-in administrative fee and enrolling in mandatory tenant insurance at $15 a month, generating roughly $12 in monthly insurance profit at typical margins. In year one, they pay $1,440 in rent plus $180 in insurance, generating perhaps $900 in gross profit after allocated operating costs. At their one-year renewal, their rent increases 10% to $132 monthly, a move most tenants simply accept rather than undertake the hassle of relocating their stored belongings. By year three, that same unit is generating $145 to $150 monthly from a tenant still storing the same boxes they moved in with, while the facility's actual operating cost to service that unit has barely changed. The tenant who looked like a $120 a month customer at signing actually represents a revenue stream that compounds meaningfully over their multi-year tenancy, particularly once you factor in that acquiring that tenant cost you a one-time marketing expense that gets amortized across years of retained, price-insensitive occupancy. So let's run two versions of the same facility and see how differently this can play out. In the optimistic scenario, your facility reaches 90% occupancy within 24 months as projected. Your market has limited new competing supply, and your rent increase strategy holds with minimal pushback, alongside strong insurance and fee attachment rates. Annual revenue reaches roughly $1.1 million once fully stabilized. After operating expenses and debt service totaling $720,000, you're clearing approximately $380,000 in annual profit, and the facility's value, based on its stabilized income, has appreciated well beyond your total development cost, creating substantial exit value if you choose to sell. Now here's the realistic scenario. Using the exact same facility, the exact same starting assumptions, two competing self-storage developers, seeing the same favorable zoning and demographic data you use to justify your project, build competing facilities within a 2-mile radius during your lease-up period. Your projected 24-month stabilization stretches to 42 months as the three facilities split available demand, and you're forced to discount rental rates 15% below your original pro forma just to compete for tenants. Your occupancy plateaus at 68% instead of 90%, well below the threshold lenders consider healthy. Annual revenue comes in at just $680,000, but your debt service obligation on the construction loan doesn't change regardless of occupancy. That $380,000 optimistic profit doesn't just shrink. It becomes a $40,000 annual loss, and you're now in discussions with your lender about loan modifications while watching two competitors fight you for the same shrinking pool of available tenants in an oversupplied local market. The operators who actually survive and thrive in this business long-term aren't the ones who built the most units or picked the cheapest available land. They're the ones who conducted genuine supply and demand analysis specific to their exact submarket before breaking ground, rather than relying on broad regional storage demand statistics that don't account for competitors already planning identical projects, who built in cash reserves sized for a lease-up period twice as long as projected, rather than the optimistic timeline, who developed genuine expertise in the rent increase and fee optimization strategies that separate mediocre operators from highly profitable ones, and who understood that self-storage's low operating costs are an advantage only if you can actually fill the building before a competitor fills theirs first. A self-storage facility, at the end of the day, isn't really a low-maintenance real estate asset at all. It's a location and timing bet wrapped around a subscription-style pricing model, where the market saturation analysis conducted years before the first orange door ever opens decides who actually survives long enough to see the facility through to real profitability.